I'm Rabbi Joshua Davidson, Senior Rabbi of Temple Emanu-El, and on behalf of our Men's Club and Streicker Cultural Center, it is my honor to welcome all of you tonight. We will hear this evening from 6 remarkable individuals who have stood atop the ramparts at the very center of a storm, one marked by rising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel protests that have swept across college campuses over the past 2 years. During that time, we have all felt the impact of a surge in harassment, intimidation, and even violence against Jews on social media, in public spaces, and at institutions of learning. Like most synagogues, Temple Emanu-El has not been immune, but few have borne the brunt more directly than the Hillel chapters on many college campuses. In too many instances, they have become sanctuaries for Jewish students against intimidation and fear. Their buildings have been surrounded by protesters, their legitimacy questioned, and their presence on campus threatened. And their directors, heroic figures, have been charged with the impossible, educating misinformed students and faculty, comforting terrified parents, supporting isolated students, and engaging with university leadership, all while standing firm in their mission to celebrate the beauty and richness of Jewish life. Tonight, we are proud to welcome the executive directors of the Hillel chapters at Brown, Columbia, Harvard, Hunter, and SUNY Stony Brook. They'll speak not only about what they and their students have endured, but also how they have responded with strength, creativity, and commitment to build vibrant communities and support a new generation of October 8th Jews, young adults awakened to their Jewish identity in the face of adversity. So joining us tonight are Rabbi Josh Bolton, Executive Director at Brown RISD Hillel, Brian Cohn, Levine Family Executive Director of the Kraft Center for Jewish Student Life at Columbia Barnard Hillel, Jessica Lemons, Executive Director of the SUNY Stony Brook Hillel, Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, Executive Director of Harvard Hillel, and Meirav Fine-Braun, Executive Director of Hunter College Hillel. Their conversation will be moderated by Rabbi Danielle Lashaw, Campus Support Director and Senior Educator for Hillel International. I want to thank all of you for being here, and a special thanks to the NYPD for their presence and for helping to keep our community safe at all times. And you can join me in thanking them. So now, please join me in welcoming our distinguished and heroic panel to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Davidson, for that introduction, and to the Streicker Center and the Temple Emanu-El Men's Club. We're really, really grateful for this invitation to be here with you this evening and to be in this beautiful space and be part of this historic conversation that the Streicker Center and Temple Emanu-El has put forward now for many, many years, focusing on life here in the region, in New York City, and among college campuses. So it's really a pleasure to be with all of you, and we're grateful to have been invited. And I'm sharing the stage with 5 incredible colleagues, friends, people I've known for a very long time, and we're excited to have this conversation together. We're excited to take your questions, and we wanted to frame a little bit for you before we jump in and talk a little bit about the past couple of years and how college campuses have supposed to be a place of learning, of growth, of exploration, of friendship, and all too often, since October 7th, our campuses have become incredibly challenging environments for Jewish students. Anti-Semitic incidents on campuses have reached record highs, with 8 in 10 Jewish college students, that's an incredible number, 8 in 10 Jewish college students experiencing or witnessing some form of anti-Semitism since October 7th. But here's the other side of the story. Over 187,000 college students engaged with Hillel last year. the largest number of students we've engaged since we opened our doors in 1923. In the middle of the horrible crisis that we've all been experiencing, Hillel doubled down, and we welcomed a generation of young people eager to explore their Jewish identity, to celebrate in community, and to commit to the Jewish people. These 5 executive directors of Hillels from across the region have navigated situations that would be unimaginable to so many of us, while simultaneously creating vibrant and exciting communities of belonging and connection and friendship and love. Brown, Columbia, Harvard, Stony Brook, and Hunter College have made headlines in the past 2 years for all the wrong reasons. And what you'll hear from them tonight goes beyond those headlines. They'll share how they've built resilient communities when faced with hostility, antisemitism, and division. Brian, I'd like to start with you. And I'd love for you to share some trends, some challenges, some successes, things that you've been seeing since October 7th.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go back before October 7th and just share that Columbia University had one of the most vibrant, engaged, diverse Jewish communities of any campus around the country. This is a campus where on a given Friday night, there's hundreds of students in the Kraft Center for Jewish Student Life, a standalone Hillel building on 115th Street, participating in one of many Friday night Shabbat services, staying for Shabbat dinner, staying after Shabbat dinner, and doing a multitude of things, and playing games, and learning with faculty members, learning with one another. And what I'm pleased to tell you is that vibrancy has very much continued. On Friday, October 6th, I was meeting with a high school family that was looking at Columbia, and I vividly remember the question coming up about anti-Semitism on campus. And I said, no, like, we've been really good here the last couple of years. Since the pandemic, things have really quieted down. Everything is wonderful. And then October 7th came. And I'm not going to get into the detail of what transpired on the 7th at the Kraft Center for Jewish Life, but it's certainly a day I'll never forget. And what I think is telling is that Saturday night, right, we had plans to celebrate Simchat Torah, where traditionally students take the Torah scrolls from the Kraft Center, they dance at the Kraft Center, they march up Broadway and over to the Columbia campus, and they dance on campus as well. And I thought for sure that students were going to want to cancel the plans for that Saturday night. I mean, we had students who had loved ones who were in Israel and had no idea how they were doing. It was just a really tragic thing to experience. And the students said, like, no, we're dancing. Like, we're going to dance, and we're going to do our thing. And it was certainly more solemn than usual, but Simchat Torah happened. And it happened last year, and it happened this year, and it's going to happen in the years to come. The bad news, right, there's like a little bit of like it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The worst of times was, I remember on October 8th, I think, some student groups posted a statement, the activists, about October 7th. And they celebrated October 7th. This was a great day for the Palestinian resistance, and it was like an 8-page statement that they published. And I remember thinking, like, finally these students, they went too far, right? No one is going to sign on to this type of rhetoric, this type of violent rhetoric that is being used. And it took a couple of weeks. There were some other statements that were produced that were much more moderate in their tone, but eventually too many student groups, too many students fell in line and in fact signed on with that violent rhetoric. We all know about the encampments on the Columbia University campus and other campuses. What I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, is that the encampments were the very tip of the iceberg. When you go under the surface and look at what too many students, faculty, and staff experienced, it was tokenization, exclusion, harassment, bullying, complete disregard of the rules of the university, and a complete disregard for just civility towards one another. That is what students experienced, and faculty and staff, for the last 2 years. And I know we're going to talk more about it, but I think that's just a little bit of insight into what we saw in the immediate aftermath of October 7th on campus.
Brian, you're bringing us back, and it really gives me the perspective to see that these past 2 years have been such a long journey with many ups and many downs. You know, if I could reflect on the past 6 months, you know, it's important, I think it's important to say that there have been changes, at least as we've experienced them on College Hill. I would say that in general, Jewish engagement, student engagement is very strong. You know, I think that the notion of the October 8th Jew is something that has a place, you know, in the younger generation as well. And we see that Jewish engagement programs, attendance, the vitality, the vibrancy is quite strong. We see new initiatives being created by students, and we see a hunger for those initiatives. You know, I can think of any number of examples of Brown, but you know, one that I think stands out is over the past several years, we've been developing an arts initiative to support students who are, whether at RISD or at Brown, focused on creative arts, visual performance. And, you know, we've seen those programs grow in extraordinary ways, and we've seen students are hungry for them, they're turning to them. You know, I hesitate to talk about Hillel as a, you know, refuge. It's a little bit, it's so hard for me to believe that we've reached that place, but you have a sense that students turn to Jewish life and Jewish platforms in order to find community, in order to bring their whole selves, in order to work through the challenges that they are confronting socially, spiritually today. I also think that you know, campus certainly over the past 6 months is quieter than it was a year ago. There's no doubt about that. And I think Hillels are taking advantage of this moment to build. It was something that we said at this point last year, facing a major divestment push at Brown, was, you know, when the calls are made to divest, we believe that this is a time to invest strongly in the future of Jewish life on campus. And that's exactly what we did over the past year. And in fact, this, you know, you can feel that this is a time of growth. This is a time of creativity. Campus is quieter probably for a number of reasons, both because of the short attention span of, you know, of students, and the fact that if you wait a year, a quarter of the students are gone and a quarter don't remember what happened last year, and if you wait 2 years, it's even more so. And also because, without a doubt, there's political realities, the political environment has changed, and our institutions are responsive in ways that are previously kind of hard to imagine. But I agree with you, Brian, about the tip of the iceberg. I would say that the rhetoric, the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist rhetoric is deeply entrenched in the institutions, is deeply entrenched in culture that our students are living within. And it's not something that can be changed overnight. It's not something that evolved overnight. And so I think that this requires much deeper thinking, strategic thinking on our part, collectively as a movement, individually as campuses, in partnership with the universities, administrations, to be thinking about what are the longer term models that we're going to use and employ in order to begin to dial that factor in a different direction.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here. We're actually Hunter College right down the street, up the street. And really excited to get to speak a little bit about our experience. I appreciated that Brian took us all the way back. You're looking at the last 6 months, so I'll take the opportunity to think about where we're at right now and where we're going to be going. I'll say I agree. It's been relatively quiet. I actually think that quiet is a misnomer because really what's happening between students is very different from what we're seeing happening from the administrative perspective. Certainly at Hunter, we've had a lot more support from the president's office. We've had a lot of better security and things of that nature. But what we're really seeing that's painful for me, because I believe that Hillel is about a home. It's about being a home and a safe place to land for our students. We have a really diverse population and they have very different needs. And for me, it's so important that we're a place where they can be themselves wholly. And what they're really seeing is their social circles are really deeply impacted by this. We have students whose friends completely left them and they had to start over at Hillel. And so that's a lot more of the trend that we're seeing now. What that means is that we're able to really support vibrant Jewish community connection in a space where students are only there 5 days a week, 8 hours a day in some cases because they work and they travel. So I'm really proud of what we're able to do in that sense, and being really flexible as a commuter school allows for us to do that. Now, you could argue that we were doing it all along, but even more so now because it feels like a much more fundamental need, as fundamental, I would say, as food, which they also need, and physical space, which they also need, and to be heard by their administrators, which they also really need.
Thank you all. Jason, I want to turn to you as the executive director of Harvard Hillel, which has been in the news every day, maybe, since October 7th. It's possible. I'm going to read off a little bit of a list here, and it's a short list. It could be much, much longer, of some of the experiences, the things that have happened that have made the news and have really impacted, I'm guessing, you as an executive director, our students, the larger Harvard community. 2 days after the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, Harvard's Palestine Solidarity Committee issued a statement calling Israel entirely responsible for the Hamas-led attack. In early December of 23, then Harvard President Claudine Gay testified before Congress and faced intense backlash for her comments. A month later, she resigned from her role. In the spring of 24, Harvard's encampment lasted 20 days and ended after negotiations with protesters. During the encampment, the protesters depicted a post of the interim president, Alan Garber, who is Jewish, with horns and a tail. The Harvard Task Force on Combating Antisemitism's report revealed that Jewish and Israeli students experienced social shunning and hostility from peers who blamed them for the Israeli government's actions.
Sounds like we should be saying Dayenu after each one of these.
This is the last one, I promise. I promise. The Trump administration is withholding federal funding as part of an ongoing investigation into the university by the Federal Task Force to combat anti-Semitism. Harvard sued the administration in response. Okay, so you can clap, sure. The news cycle versus what actually happens every day. So Jason, I want you to spend a little bit of time bringing us through what it looks like, what it feels like to be the executive director of Harvard Hillel. And I want you to, talk a little bit about how you have taken care of your community right there on campus. And as a rabbi, focusing on pastoral care for students and for your staff, while also doing the important work of tending to the larger Harvard Jewish community, which doesn't live there and doesn't go to school there anymore, and maybe never did because their parents or their grandparents, and many of them are alumni and live all across the world. So what does it look like to be in that relationship locally and worldwide?
First, I just want to say what a delight and an honor it is to be on the stage with all of you and here at the Streicker Center in Temple Emanu-El, and how refreshing it always is to be back in New York. I lived here for a dozen years. I sometimes say to my friends, my life feels like someone had the bad idea of making a season of The West Wing that was about the Jews of Harvard. It's just like fast-paced, a lot of walking, talking, a lot of, never know what's going to happen. So I think the thing that I want to try to explain is there is a story here, and I think the media and I think the organized Jewish community have generally done a poor job of telling the story and framing it. And that's put some real strain on our community, and I want to explain how we've dealt with that. And what I mean by that is we've primarily defaulted to a framework of are Jewish students safe? And I think there's kind of a couple problems with that. The main one I want to point out is at a place like Harvard, so there's two I want to point out. The first is, at a place like Harvard, the Jewish community has strategic interests, vital existential interests, that in some ways and at some times do not overlap with the experience of Jewish students. So for example, if Israel is being slandered in a seminar at the School of Public Health, which happened today, it's not the first time, and the people in that room are going to go on to work at the State Department or the UN or Doctors Without Borders, that is a major problem for the Jewish community, even if there are no Jewish students in that seminar room, and probably especially if there are no Jewish students in that room. And these are the questions like Josh was saying about, things that are entrenched, things that are part of culture, where it's kind of axiomatic that Israel is evil, maybe it's the paradigm of evil that's not open to revision necessarily, and that is a major problem. Now, the second piece I want to describe, and this is, I think, probably the hottest take I'm going to offer tonight, is I think the Jewish community made a tactical error in attacking the encampments and trying to get them shut down. Right? Napoleon always said, never interrupt your enemy when they're in the middle of making a mistake. I'll tell you a story. I was actually at Yale, where I was the senior rabbi for the year of October 7. I'm richer in Yale stories. I got the delight of working with students more closely there during those years. So a student I was extremely close with, and we were kind of mental and spiritual mirror images of each other, except he self-described as an anti-Zionist. He said, "You're really a Zionist?" And I would say, "Yes, I am." He had come to this, by the way, by being at a Jewish, this is his narrative, pluralistic Jewish day school growing up. It was pluralistic about everything except Israel, where if you said the word Palestinian in class, you were running the risk of the teacher screaming at you until you cried in front of your peers. That was he had a lot of scars coming in. And there was a Saturday night when the Yale encampment got a little hectic, a little hairy, and the student came to my office the next day and he said, "I've been trying to think about why it is for the last 2 weeks, every time I've walked past the encampment, the only thought that comes into my mind is that even though all my favorite Yiddish writers were serious, devoted socialists, they were all murdered by the Bolsheviks in the Gulag." And 2 weeks later, when the encampment had gotten even more either anti-Semitic or visibly anti-Semitic, depending on who you ask, and they'd actually started chanting "Globalize the Intifada," which wasn't part of the Yale encampment at once. This student said to a friend of his, who was the head of the local J Street U chapter, he said, "Noah, we need to realize they were right when they told us that every leftist movement ultimately turns on its Jews." And I just want to point out how grateful the Jewish community should be for 13 years of scars being undone in 4 weeks of exposure. And that story is repeated again and again. For example, if you look back at the data of Harvard students from this past fall, their views on the presidential election were basically in line with the Democratic Party, and their views on Israel were actually significantly more pro-Israel than the average 18 to 22-year-old Democratic voter, and people said that was because of their exposure to the encampment. People would say, "I went into the encampment," I would say to the people there, "I want to see how you see the world, tell me what books you read." And there were a dozen people in the circle, one person named one book, everything else was social media influencers. They're like, these are not serious people. And so I think there's a way in which, actually on campus, the protests were generally quite unpopular, and their tactics backfired, and you could see crimson after crimson article on this point. And the image I want you to have instead is the paradigmatic story I always think about, this is a Yale story again, but there are similar Harvard ones. And this story happened before October 7th, just like we were saying, right? There was kind of a Me Too moment when things became visible that had been happening. Student is a first year, she's working in a biology lab. There's an older student who's mentoring her, and they're chatting while an experiment's running. And the older student says, oh, you know, what classes are you taking? And the first year student says, this and this and this and a language. The older student says, oh, what language? And the younger student says, modern Hebrew. And the older student kind of recoils and refuses to make herself available for any more mentoring or support. And the student didn't feel like she could go to the PI of the lab or really have any recourse. And stories like that are happening all over and being unreported and not acted on. I think there's a core sense here, right, that that's not in the headlines. There's no free speech issues. But the intuition is, you know, if Jessica and I are on the basketball team and she's open, I have to pass to her, even if I think she has the wrong positions on the Ukraine war. And if I'm not willing or able to do that, I can't be on the basketball team. And there's actually a basic sense of your role at the university. You're here to preserve, transmit, create knowledge. And if you're not willing to do that with the people sitting opposite the seminar table, with the people across the hall from you in your dorm, there are plenty of other types of organizations you can be in where you won't have to be with people who are different from you on these issues. But this is not one of them. And I think that very kind of painful realignment is happening in a lot of ways. And the last thing I want to just offer is that time frame is very, very significant, that this has been going on. There's a process that had been going on for decades in the university. Not just our really kind of elite higher education, the literary world, which we've seen in Penn America, you know, the arts world. And I think many of us, like, you know, Brian, you're saying, like, you told people there wasn't really anti-Semitism. I said the same thing at Yale. I really poo-pooed a lot of what Barry Weiss was saying, and I don't look back proudly on that. I think she was shouting, not enough of us were listening. And the greatest mistake that those who wanted to really turn universities into kind of a part of a progressive social movement and away from their mission to, you know, preserve and transmit and expand knowledge. The biggest mistake they made was those 8-page statements and the encampments. There's a kind of overreach, which has kind of galvanized a kind of a moderate reaction. And a lot of our work has been actually supporting our alumni community, which you mentioned is like thousands of people around the world, in becoming, we say, informed, cohesive, and effective. And again, that's not, you know, oh, there's an encampment, we have to shut it down. It's actually understanding how we got here, what kinds of levers and mechanisms could be effective. We've done a lot of public things, and I also share one of the things which, you know, it's not private, but we haven't normally advertised them, is the way that Harvard's governance works is that there's really a very small circle of very, very influential alumni, many of whom are Jewish. And so when the anti-Semitism report that you mentioned was published this spring and again in the beginning of the fall, we basically convened calls of more or less the top 100 Jewish donors to Harvard. Who had not been an organized group, and therefore were not a particularly effective group. And they have really made great strides through relationships they've formed, through being on message, through coordinating, hey, the dean said that to you. She also said that to me in our meeting 5 weeks ago. I feel like we're being handled. Let's now go back to her, both of us, and press our case more effectively. And I could share a number of examples of that, but I do want to point out that when you understand this to be a multi-decade effort of what got us here, then it allows you to play kind of chess and not checkers in how you're responding and where you're kind of actually looking for what are the leading and not the lagging indicators. And that has been a critical thing actually in allowing our community to kind of dial down its tension by feeling not disempowered and not disoriented, but actually oriented and effective.
Great, thanks, Jason. I want to ask a quick follow-up, which we didn't prep for, but are you teaching students right now? Are you learning Torah with them on a regular basis?
Yeah, so that's the best part of the job. So we have a group, and I'll just show, but it's we meet Friday mornings at 9 a.m. You know, anything that happens at 9 a.m. at a university is a special thing if there are students involved. And God help us, the group is called, one of the seniors picked it, she's a philosophy major. It's ointology, like ontology, the study of being, but with a little oi thrown in there. And it is the most, you know, productive and wide-ranging conversations, you know, philosophy of law, afterlife, and we do like ethics of war and all those things. And it's just a beautiful group. Some people have never done traditional Jewish learning. Some people have never been in the same room or in a discussion with each other. And those kinds of things are happening. I just got a report from the first year education program, which had its first meeting last night. Students at the end are saying, like, wait, I know that sign up is over and we had our first meeting. We're like, I actually have these two friends I'd really like to bring in next week. Is it too late for them to sign up? And I think one of the things that's, again, kind of hard to understand, like, the existential angst and thirst that are what it means to be 18 or 20 years old, which we all remember if we think back far enough, are still alive and well among the kids, and the appetite and the uptake of when we can provide wisdom and perspective from the Jewish tradition is just flourishing, and I think would inspire any of you if you want to come to the library at Harvard Hillel at 9 o'clock on Friday. We'd love to have you join in.
Great. Jess, at Stony Brook, you and I have worked a lot together in the past couple of years, and I'm so pleased with the way that you have forged a relationship with the SUNY Chancellor's Office and with Chancellor King's entire staff, the legal team there, and have prioritized working with your administration. So I would love for you to share how relationship building with administrators and with the Chancellor's team has supported Jewish students on campus and Hillel's work in general.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And just to echo my colleagues' gratitude to Temple Emanu-El and the Streicker Center. I think for us, we were seeing a lot of the same trends that a lot of my colleagues here and around the country were seeing. We had encampments, we had arrests, we had harassment of visibly Jewish students. And I think I reflect back on the time of, just after October 7th. Thank you for that PTSD trip, Brian. But I think those immediate months were incredibly challenging. In a lot of ways, everyone was kind of trying to navigate what felt like a brand new college experience. I had very similar conversations with students who were thinking about coming to Stony Brook, and the one thing I told them was, you never have to worry about anti-Semitism here. Students are so apathetic, they don't care about anything. And for those of you who know anything about Stony Brook, it's a STEM school. Our students are gonna be doctors, they're gonna be dentists, and they're gonna be engineers. They could not care less about politics if I paid them. And for them, it's almost like a body swap after October 7th. I did not recognize the campus that I was on. And I think my students didn't recognize their peers either. And it fundamentally changed the conversations that we were having with our administrators, thinking specifically about a relatively new president who we then gifted to Yale. And then had an interim president, and now we've welcomed a new president. And so it's been, 2 years since October 7th, and we've made our way through 3 presidents, which I actually don't think is an uncommon experience on this stage.
Very familiar.
Same here.
Does everyone, So.
Except for Brown.
Yeah, okay.
Except for Brown.
How nice for you.
I see you've planted people in the audience for yourself. But I think that this complete change in actual people in the administration changes the dynamic, and the actual shift in what a college campus that is traditionally STEM-based, it completely changed everything. So for us, what we saw is that we actually had a working relationship, which is probably similar to that of my colleagues, with our administration. So prior to October 7th, we actually had an anti-Semitism task force already in place, which allowed us to be really nimble in the moment. And it was born out of a very, in passing, and this is like a poor wording for it, but an in passing swastika that had appeared on a free speech wall where someone was trying to be edgy and thought that was the way to do it. And the university was obviously outraged because there's no nuance in a swastika. And so they had formed this anti-Semitism task force, and this was in 2021. And so we already knew everybody. We had already met multiple times and had really deep conversations about what it meant to proactively address anti-Semitism and anti-Jew hate. And Then October 7th happened. I remember, I've told this story to a few folks, but when October 7th happened, I didn't hear about it from my Jewish friends. I didn't hear about it on my phone or the news because I was asleep. I got a call from campus police who asked me if we needed extra security. And I asked them, why? What should I know that you know? And they said, do you know what's happening in Israel? I assumed it was just regular rocket fire, and it wasn't, and I learned very quickly what was going on. But I think that was just a huge indicator of the relationship that we had forged. And then fast forwarding, we had a really tough first year after October 7th. Like I said, we had 2 rounds of arrests, we had encampments, et cetera, harassment. I was being followed around campus, my car got keyed. It was like a really challenging year. And that summer, I remember our administration said, don't get comfortable and don't relax because we've got work to do. We sat down that summer and we planned for every possible inevitability around what does it look like when someone tries to bring an encampment again? What do our policies and procedures look like? What happens if something even gives the appearance that it might be what we call like a red hot event where something might be controversial, and actually like extrapolating out like policies and procedures that already exist that are implied and actually making them explicit. It meant meeting more regularly with the chancellor's team. We are so lucky that we have Chancellor King and Chairwoman Tisch. They've been incredible partners, and specifically on their team, the legal team and the vice chancellor's team, they have been so communicative, very responsive. We are the largest state university system in the country. There are 64 state university, part of the SUNY system, there are 64 colleges and universities. We are enormous. And Stony Brook in particular is the 2nd largest by population and 1st largest by acreage, and we are one of the flagship institutions, and our administration took those things very seriously and took that title very seriously. We're also the #1 public school in New York State. And so we take those titles and those responsibilities really seriously. We put into place not only reactive policies of what do we do when something bad happens, but proactive policies around events and possible incidents, and then also proactive policies around what does the educational system look like around Title VI for administrators, for educators, for faculty and staff, and then ultimately for students, as well as anti-Semitism education.
Jess, I want to commend you. I feel like you're a beautiful example of executive directors learning a whole new set of skills and a whole new language. And Jess is one of our directors who I feel like could, if they were handing out certificates for Title VI law, and time, place, and manner, and understanding all of the ins and outs of what it means to be a legal consultant for higher ed. I feel like Jess is one of our directors who's really gotten it right these past couple of years, so it's been a pleasure working with you.
I will also say, just to brag about Stony Brook for one more second, we had a 90% decrease in reported anti-Semitic incidents from the 2023-2024 academic year to the following year, which I think is really indicative of the fact that when you make policies and you actually stick to the consequences that you've articulated to students, faculty, and staff, it actually makes a big difference. And I know that feels really intuitive, but for a lot of folks it's not. And so I really want to commend our administration and the SUNY system for that work.
Amazing, thank you. Brian, are you ready for your bulleted list from Columbia?
Hit me.
Okay. As early as October 12th of 23, the university closed its gates to campus for those not part of the Columbia community. The last time Columbia closed its gates to the public was on September 11th, 2001. In April 2024, NYPD swept the Gaza Solidarity Encampment and the occupied Hamilton Hall, arresting over 100 protesters. In May of 25, the university president authorized NYPD to arrest over 70 pro-Palestinian protesters who disrupted students in Butler Library. Most recently, as part of the deal with the Trump administration, the university hired 36 special officers with the ability to arrest or remove students from campus. So Brian, we're in the heart of New York City, and you, in the past couple of years, have had to think about safety and security on campus in entirely new ways. We'd love to hear from you how campus has changed since October 7th, what's happened since the encampments, and overall, I mean, how are Jewish students experiencing life at Columbia?
So I think it's important to just paint a little bit of a picture of what led to the closing of the gates. And, it was, I don't want to say like a war zone, because I don't really want to, it wasn't a war zone, but it was intense and uncomfortable. And for the first time, I've been at Columbia since 2012. For the first time ever, I was hyper aware of my surroundings when I was walking around campus. And at the height of the incidents, we had hundreds of people coming from around New York City and beyond, some waving Palestinian flags, some waving Israeli flags, but targeting Columbia University as the place they wanted to be to yell and scream and antagonize one another. They would have loved nothing more than to be on campus and getting into academic buildings and getting in the face of students. And to the university's credit, I mean, this is not, we don't enjoy the gates being closed, and they are still closed today. But it was necessary, and I am convinced that there would have been people would have been hurt if the gates remained open. The reason for the increase in public safety is because Columbia University has not allowed NYPD on campus since the Vietnam-era protests. And so we have a wonderful public safety department, but their rights are very limited up until we got these peace officers. And of course, shortly after, on October 12th, NYPD was back on campus for a limited time when things were really bad. I want to break this down into three pieces. The first is safety and security, and physical safety was really the immediate need that we addressed on the 7th, and thank God several years ago Columbia University really invested in the security infrastructure of the Kraft Center for Jewish Student Life at Columbia. We never had to go to like a heightened state of alert, and on October 7th we did increase our security, and unfortunately we have not gone back since. But we hardened the building with extra security measures. We started working very, very closely with NYPD, FBI, all sorts of law enforcement agencies, and really just wanted to make sure that whether it was in the Kraft Center, at the Chabad House on 113th Street, at the university, or just on Broadway or Amsterdam and in the surrounding areas of Columbia University, that students, faculty, staff, community members were all safe to walk around. And at the height of it, I mean, we had police drones flying overhead and ESU police officers all up and down the streets, and it was intense. When I see a helicopter hovering overhead, I still get a spike in anxiety from those days in 2023. So the PTSD that some of my colleagues joked about is very real. The other piece of this is the emotional security, and I think what's most important there is like we really wanted, we have a model of, we do our work by having one-on-one meetings with students and listening to them and really hearing them and trying to figure out like what is it that we can do to support their Jewish journey on campus. So we actually just doubled down on that effort, and we made sure that every single student in our system was getting a text, a phone call, an email from someone on my team saying, hey, I'd love to just catch up and hear what's going on. We reached out to Columbia Psychological Services and discovered that there's a wonderful Israeli psychologist on their team. And Yaniv, the psychologist, came to the Kraft Center once a week for months and sat with students and spoke with Israeli students in Hebrew. We have the largest population of Israeli students in the Ivy League, and there's still a stigma attached to meeting with a therapist or psychologist, and Yaniv was able to just sit in a comfortable space and engage with students in Hebrew and meet with American and other students in English and just help us navigate it without the students having to explain what it was that transpired on October 7th, and that was tremendously important. So that was some of the physical and emotional security actions that we took. The second piece was just ensuring Jewish joy on campus and trying to create a normal, wonderful space for students, a sense of normalcy within the walls of the Craft Center for Jewish Life. And it didn't feel like business as usual, but we also aimed big and thought big and said, what else can we do here? And there's a beautiful Israeli musician named Ishai Ribo who agreed to do a concert for us at the Craft Center just a couple months after October 7th, 2023. And to this day, I feel like Ishai gave us permission to sing and to dance and to experience joy. Shortly after that, we had a big idea and reached out to athletics at Columbia and said, hey, is there any way we could get the basketball courts at Columbia University on a Friday night? And long story short, we ended up hosting a Shabbat dinner on the courts at Columbia for 1,200 Jewish students, faculty, and staff. We did it in partnership with Chabad. And the look on the students' faces, but also the look on the these professors who had experienced such hate from some of their peers and were only seeing the complaints and never saw the beauty of the Jewish community that we experience every day. Some of them were moved to tears of joy and warmth by seeing so many students come together on the basketball courts to celebrate a Shabbat dinner. The third piece, and this is a piece that I never expected that there would be a need for, but the advocacy piece. I'm someone that very much prefers to go about my business quietly behind the scenes. If there's a problem, I want to call someone, have a difficult conversation, and take care of it. I never want to, air my dirty laundry in public. And despite numerous attempts of trying to address my concerns quietly and behind the scenes, nothing was happening on campus. Nothing was happening to protect the university community from what was happening. And so in mid-November, we started to reach out very publicly and transparently to our alumni community, our parent community. We asked people to reach out to the president's office at Columbia and demand that the president meet with Jewish and Israeli students. For what it's worth, I also demanded that she meet with Palestinian and Arab students and just say, what do you need? How can we be here to support you? New university president who was clearly taken by, shocked by what had transpired and didn't know where to begin. And we said, you start by meeting with your students and just saying, I'm new, what can I do to help you? How can I support you? The other piece is we demanded that rules be enforced, rules be clarified, and rules be enforced. And the university moved way too slowly on that. The same students who were arrested in the encampment were the same students who interrupted and barged into a History of Modern Israel class and handed out anti-Semitic flyers and propaganda. They are the same students who were later arrested in Butler Library for. This wasn't an act of political activism. This was trespassing, vandalism, assault. That is what transpired in Butler Library. And the fact that these students were still on campus to do each of these incidents was a complete failure of the system. And we demanded that rules be changed and clarified and enforced, that students be held accountable. And unfortunately, despite us working very hard and alumni of the university and faculty members, not nearly enough was done, and that is what ultimately led the federal government to step in and play hardball with the university. And it saddens me to say this, but it was only after that took place that we saw the university get unstuck. And I just want to wrap it up by saying, there's a difference, I think, between what we don't want to forget and what we want to remember. And I will never forget the hostility that our students faced on campus. I'll never forget the students crying in our offices every single day because of what they were experiencing in the dorms and in their sororities and student clubs and in the classroom. I'll never forget any of those moments, and I will always remember our students who stepped up and didn't think they could go on national news and went on national news, and Noah, who addressed a rally in DC in front of tens of thousands of people, Lishi, Rebecca, so many other students appearing on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. I'll remember the faculty members, the hundreds of faculty members, most of whom you've never heard of, who demanded of the university administration that they do more to protect the students. I will always remember this look in the students' faces when they stepped onto that basketball court, when they danced at the Ishai Rebo concert, when they sang with Matisyahu on campus. Those are the memories that are going to always stick with me. So we're very much, I think, fighting the fight and doing what we can, but it's so much more than that. It is so much more nuanced and interesting and challenging and beautiful all at the same time, and I think that's what is most important for everyone to know.
Thanks so much, Brian. Josh, I want to turn to you, and if we didn't have two more directors, we would end there. That was great. I appreciate that uplifting way, to just make sure that we're remembering all of the really, really good moments that our students stepped into. And Josh, you did have a really, really difficult moment where there were threats to your safety, the safety of your family and your staff. And I want to make sure that, that you're able to speak about that and talk about the support that you received and how that impacted you as a director. And maybe you can share a bit about that.
Okay, thank you. And Brian, I wonder how many of us had, for Columbia it was Ishai Rebo. I remember very clearly the Maccabees came to Brown in it must have been March or April, and that felt like a very cathartic, way of tying up the year. I wonder how many of us have those experiences. Okay, so, yes, I was talking about the dialectic between, the Jewish dialectic between joy and oi. This is definitely an oi moment to linger here on. Yes, it was a Saturday night, and I received, both I and our managing director received separate, pretty extensive death threats through email. And I remember I woke up on Sunday morning and was making my coffee when I opened up to check my mail, and I saw it. And I decided that I would sit down and drink my coffee first before I went and told my wife, and began. But, about, an hour later, I was I was at the building, and, we were putting the pieces together, and the threat was credible enough, was clearly credible enough that, it was elevated very quickly. It's still an open investigation by the FBI, and every 6 months or so, there's an update around it. It was an extraordinarily painful, challenging set of days. State police with dogs, around the house, and surreal. But one thing that I remember very, very clearly was the extent to which the Brown RISD Hillel community, our board of trustees, the university, and our Hillel International, community stepped up very quickly and very supportively for us, and everyone took it very seriously. And I probably have not made total sense of that, episode, but I'm struck by the memory of the amount, the president of the university reaching out, the head of the Department of Public Safety really being almost like a personal resource for us. And it really was, in many ways, kind of a door that opened into a new dynamic of relationship between BRH and the university security infrastructure. There's always been a very strong relationship there, but we've seen over the past year and a half, especially, new dynamics and new kind of frontiers opening up, and this is a trend that we've seen on a number of campuses where university administrations are taking responsibility for Hillel and Jewish student safety in ways that are much beyond what the previous years. And at Brown, we have our own version of that in which the university and Hillel is partnering in very, very concrete ways to protect Jewish students, both in Jewish facilities and around campus. I'm not saying that's a silver lining, but it certainly is one of the outcomes of these many, instances that we have. I can recall there was one moment where the building was surrounded by protesters. Again, in the moment, it was like it didn't seem real. Almost. So to talk about it now is much more, you feel how dramatic it was and how scary it was, and all of those things have led to very positive developments in terms of thinking forward around security. I think that the other piece for me about the death threats, and then, I don't know, I'm sure all of you have a little folder of hate mail in your Gmail account. I mean, it's one day it's going to be an amazing book, an amazing collection. I mean, just what people were willing to say. Folks who I know, folks who I would see, what students and faculty and administrators or whoever were willing to write to you, it really was, took your breath away sometimes, and it was very, very hard on the heart. One of the things that I've definitely become sensitive to is that, we're so proud of Hillel and our tradition of pluralism, but, one of the great wounds of the past several years took place, in the heart of pluralism, and pluralism is not popular. It's out. It's not cool. What is cool, is the polarized environment in which we live in which and it's not the universities that created this. It's a broader cultural reality. But people have found homes on the edges of discourse, and there's very little incentive and very little, I would say, leadership being modeled of people of finding a way to meet in the middle, and being in the middle. Being a plural, I think Hillel is an organization in the middle where that's a unique gift that we have brought and that we kind of bring into the future. But operating in this world, it's been a really extraordinary challenge, and I'm sure all of us can relate to that in different ways. But the middle is not popular. And so I think to some extent it's like they call for divestment, we call for investment. I think that this is a trend that we still are in the midst of, this polarized environment. I think that as Jewish professionals, as Hillel, as a movement, we need to recognize that remains a treasured jewel of ours, that the hope and the striving to bring folks together, to learn from one another, to disagree, but to do so in a way that brings us forward, right? We can't give up on that. We have to harden our buildings, we have to increase security measures, but we must not give up on the vision of for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people, that we can come together, but that also that we should be a model for the universities that we're on, that this is an example of how we can bring folks, across the bridges, back to one another. I'm not saying that we've accomplished that, I'm just saying we cannot despair that at this moment.
Beautiful. Thank you, Josh. I feel like you've teed up Merav beautifully. And so, Merav, you know, what I love about you is that, I mean, I love a lot of things about you, and this, you don't despair, right? And you push so beautifully into taking care of Jewish students at Hunter and making sure that they have what they need in terms of mental health support and wellness initiatives and addressing food scarcity issues in the CUNY system. And so, as our last executive director of the evening to speak about what you've done since October 7th to take care of your students, I would love for you to share.
Sure, thank you so much. Any opportunity to talk about how much I love my students is an opportunity to tell you the truth. They are so special and so diverse and come from all 5 boroughs and all sorts of ethnic backgrounds. They're Russian and they're Mizrahi and they're Orthodox and they're just Jewish, and sometimes they want a bagel and sometimes they just need a nap and sometimes they don't have enough food at home, and so my job is to make sure they have it. We have a population with 80% food insecurity on our campus, and we only just this year got kosher food at our cafeteria, which is of course unaffordable, but don't worry, you can get it at Hunter Hillel for way less, almost free if you need it to be free, but more if you want to pay, because dignity also matters. So following 10/7, we came in the very next day to, actually we didn't come in the very next day because the very next day was Columbus Day, and I remember that because I called every single student leader myself. I called 150 students that day. I spent the whole day on the phone with them just to make sure that they were where they needed to be. Now that's a little bit easier for my staff to do because we're relatively small and we only serve 1,500 Jews. So we called every single person. And then the next day we came into the week of rage, in which our entire school was essentially cloaked in keffiyehs. Now, if you've never been to Hunter College, I invite you to join us. It's just 3 blocks and a couple avenues up, and we're there every day, and I'd love to see each and every one of you. But it's really hard to find the Hillel, so you should call me first, because you might get lost. You have to go into multiple buildings, and there are lots of stairwells, and the elevator might break down. But once you get there, you'll go down a hallway called the Multi-Faith Center of Hunter College, which is a really beautiful way to describe a hallway with 5 rooms. The Muslim Student Association, the Hillel, the Sikh and Hindu Club, which shares a space, and the Christian Club, and a computer lab. And that's the Multi-Faith Center. And that entire hallway, along with all of the other hallways on each of 17 floors of 4 buildings, including the skyways, which you can see when you go to Lex, covered in keffiyehs. And my students had to come into that. And my response was, well, we have to sit with them. We have to hold them and hug them and remind them that they're human and that we love them. And the very first thing I did when I came in that day was I made a video and I posted it on Instagram. And what I said in the video was, you guys, I want you to remember that I love you and you're beautiful. And you deserve to be here, and your joy matters. So come to Hillel. And my board was amazing. They paid for sushi, and they paid for pizza, and they paid for all of the different types of foods you could possibly have, because we thought, you know what we can give them is we can give them comfort food, right? We can't not make them walk down this hallway, right? They have to walk down the hallway to get to me. But once they're there, I can give them the whole world. And I had the immense support of these local foundations who care so deeply for the needs of our students, of amazing colleagues like Danielle. Hillel International, I cannot tell you what it is to have the support of people like that when you are absolutely at the bottom. It is beyond words. And colleagues like these, who I could call any day of the week and say, I just need to cry to you. And they're like, okay, I'll cry tomorrow. Or like in 2 hours maybe. It is beyond words. And what UJA Federation put into existence in order to make this happen, I mean, starting even as far back as 2021, our campus, Hunter, was the first to pioneer a full-time social worker on our campus, embedded in the Hillel. I'm deeply proud of this program. It has been life-changing, transcendent for our students. And it's nationwide now and CUNY-wide now, and it's unbelievable. And we could not have done that without the support of folks like UJA Federation, of folks at Hillel International, and local foundation support. It's transformational. But if you remember, you know, I can't do the Brian thing where he said the things to remember and forget. I didn't practice that, so I'll do mine, which is the most important thing to remember is that the students want to be seen and loved and heard. And when we can do that, when we have the support of our administrators to do that, which we do, when we have the support of local foundations, of our incredible federation, of our colleagues, there is nothing we cannot accomplish together. That's what Jewish community is.
Thanks, Marav. That was a great way to end. We have to conclude. We're at time, everyone. We're so grateful to the Streicker Center for Temple Emanu-El Men's Club. Thank you so much. Rabbi Davidson, you wanted to close for us?
Only to say thank you. I hope you'll all join me in thanking Mirav Feinbraun, Rabbi Josh Bolton, Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, Jessica Lemons, Brian Cohn, and Rabbi Danielle Lashaw. We thank you not just for sharing what you shared tonight, but for taking care of our kids with such love and such concern and being such role models of commitment for all of us. Thank you for being here tonight and speaking with us. Thank you, everybody.